Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Mediums in Action with me, Martin Litt-Wilson, and my good friend and expert medium, Ian Doherty.
Hello, everybody, and hello, Martin. It's a lovely intro as usual. I hope you're keeping well.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I've had some really weird experiences, some very strange stuff happening, and always on a Wednesday or Wednesday night.
Yeah.
Well, the other day, I was sat in my living room with my wife, and we were just watching television. And for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, we kept having this tapping on the door. The door opened, and it sounded like somebody was playing with the keys in the door, the chain on the door. We kept going out, and then it suddenly stopped. And we've not heard it since. And, you know, we investigated everything. We tried to work out what it was. Couldn't find it. But yet, for, as I say, a good hour and a half, somebody was messing with the door. I don't know if there's some sort of symbology with the door, maybe. But I certainly couldn't sense anything. I couldn't feel that there was anything. So I was quite skeptical that, well, maybe it was, house settling or something like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, the wind on the door, whether it was blustery or whatever, it could, that's one of the logical things, isn't it? But it's funny because there's a lot of synchronicity between us, because I've had a lot of stuff happen on a Wednesday, and it is largely centered around my cat. I'm not saying that she's levitating or anything there, but the fact is, where whenever spirit come into my house, it seems to be centered on the top of the stairs and leading down the stairs and into my bedroom as well. And my cat she's very new to me. She's been with me for 4 months, and she's reacting in a really strange way, where my previous cat, I had her for 16 years, bless her, never once reacted to seeing ghosts or spirits in the way that my current cat Millie does. And that always happens on a Wednesday, but I very rarely get any feelings other than, oh, there's somebody here, but that's it. And I find that weird, in the fact, well, there's no wind, the house isn't settling, and I've had some really weird ones where Millie was sort of stood upright, her front paws on my leg, and she was really growling in a menacing way, and I thought, well, I can't feel anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's strange. And I'm having similar experience in that I can't actually sense who it is or what it is. I just know there's an energy there, and there's something there. But I mean, the door rattling. I mean, it's a new house, and the front door is, it's one of those triple locks, so it can't move. It can't. There's no way the chain should be moving. And
well, no, definitely not.
And it definitely sounds as if somebody's fiddling around with it. And it's definitely not one of the kids. It's not, it's definitely coming from there. And then the final thing that happened was the door actually opened. It kind of pushed it must have been locked. It must have been closed, but not fully closed.
Yeah.
But then the door opened, and it wasn't a windy night. It was quite still. And again, can't work it out what it was. So it's intriguing. It's been intriguing. And this last week, I know in the last podcast, which I think was about 2 weeks ago now, we just launched our course.
Yes,
we've now got students all around the world. Thank you very much if you're listening, for joining the Sentia Extra 2 page as well, and discussing your experiences. And feel free to get involved, and thank you very much for supporting us. And I think there's about 2,000 minutes so far has been.
I know it's absolutely amazing, Martin.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really good. So today I thought we could talk about, I suppose, alleged evil entities, sort of black-eyed children, shadow men. For thousands of years, we've kind of believed that there are evil entities. And you look at the huge amount of books and research into religion, folklore and belief. And yet, certainly within this last 10 years, we've had these reports of black-eyed children and shadow men. Now, the strange thing for me is when you talk about black-eyed children and shadow men, they're always very dark and black. But yet, we often relate dark and black to evil or Lucifer. And if we go back to like the earliest sort of reference to Lucifer, or the first pictorial design of Lucifer, we have to go back to 12th century France, and Lucifer's actually shown as a blue angel.
Yeah, I remember you pointing that out to me.
Up to probably the 15th century, I would say that anything evil was kind of related to blue and dark blue. And it's only, I think, from Victorian times that we've associated dark with something bad. And I think that's to do with mourning because of what happened with Victorians. I mean, have you ever witnessed sort of shadowy figures or things like that?
To be honest, no. And this is where I'm a little bit ignorant of, of this type of phenomena, particularly as you've mentioned, going back into, thousands of years and different cultures. But I take this, on a more science base. I'm wanting to know a little bit of what it could be, and my clairvoyant ability, i.e. seeing spirit, is strong. I can see spirit or ghost energy in perfect colour, even though it's pitch black in that room, because of the way that mediumship works. So I've never seen anything black or darting about, and my sort of thoughts really go over towards, could it be a psychological basis? For instance, if you're in a known haunted location, it's dark, are you then thinking, oh, somebody's going to jump out and get me, there's going to be this, I'm going to be, because people have different levels of knowledge, understanding and cultural beliefs. So maybe they are thinking somebody's going to jump out at me, somebody's going to, attack me. So you're on a heightened alert, and maybe that might play a part, so could it be the fight flight? Have you got adrenaline going round, the enhanced cortisol within the bloodstream? Is that playing a part that adds to the mind?
I think you're saying something right there, because I mean, with shadow men, if people don't know what shadow men are, and I'll come back to this in a minute, Ian, but basically, for people who don't know, shadow men, people say that there are maybe just one shadow man, and he's seen at multiple locations. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that using that same theory, that's like saying if I saw a black Labrador in London and I saw one in Scotland, it must be the same Labrador.
Yeah.
It's not. So people have experiences with a shadow man or a shadowy figure, and they go online and they say they've seen this, witnessed this, and then people are kind of linking it together as being just the one entity who's kind of going around the world, which is absolutely nonsense. But when you look at how the shadow man is seen or anything like that, a lot of the time people say that they saw they might have just seen the ghostly limbs or head, or they might have seen the feet or something like that. But to me, that sounds like partial manifestation. Do you know, when we look at the, like the old seances, what they used to do, and the cabinet, they used to be a manifestation of a hand or light or things like that. I mean, is there a possibility in that what people are experiencing is not, obviously, it's not one entity, but could it be a manifestation of some sort?
I would say I would not rule it out as not being. Now, the reason that I'm putting it over in that way, because the ectoplasm, which is derived from the medium's body, and you are looking, it is nearly always like a milky white texture, but that is when it's fully formed. So when you are looking at that type of thing, whereby you might see a pair of limbs, because obviously during the time that the energy was laid down, perhaps if it was a representation of a ghost energy, then you might be saying, well, part of it we can't see because we've built up over it, or we've taken things down, and you can see ghosts on different sort of levels, floating in the air, sort of walking halfway between the ground. So whilst there is a good possibility of it could be, and maybe it's a new way that maybe spirit might be able, or might be thinking about working, without the ectoplasm, and therefore coming through in a different way. So there is, I personally wouldn't rule it out, but I would say it's probably about a 5% chance, maybe, I think.
But it's interesting that you mentioned Milky White because when I was younger, I had a lot of experiences, and I always remember the house we lived in was haunted. And I remember on the very last day, all the delivery men had. I must have only been about 10, I think. No, actually, no. I was actually 15. I've just realised I was 15. It was the last day, and the delivery men had been. I went upstairs. I went to the toilet, and I thought, the ghost hasn't done anything. And as I turned round and I reached to the towel, and I always remember this, a milky white hand came through the wall, grabbed the towel and pulled it onto the floor. And I thought, bugger, you had to do it, and it's interesting. It wasn't black. It wasn't a shadowy hand that came through.
Yeah.
It was a milky white hand. It looked unnatural. And I saw it come through the wall and pull it down onto the floor.
Now that would make more sense. Sorry, Martin.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned about the Milky White Hand because obviously we again, because of media, because of people's beliefs, we imagine that everything that does things like that. I mean, that was mischievous, and it should have been black. It should have been an evil hand that came through. It just looked like a white hand that came through the wall and did that. Mm-hmm. But I think also as well is when we look at shadow men. And this is something that we've discussed before. There's a lot of the Shadow Men reports, and certainly the ones that we used to get through. I used to co-edit a magazine called MysteryMag.com, and obviously we used to get a lot of people on events as well. Also say, I saw something moving on the corner of my eye. Straight away, when people used to say that there was something happening on the peripheral vision, I would be inclined to say that it's probably due to the rods in the eye on the outer side.
Yes, definitely.
If I remember correctly, and you might have to correct me here, but these rods, these cells that are on the outside are very low resolution, very compacted, but they are very good at detecting movement. So So if if anything's moving very slightly, you might feel that it's actually moving far quicker. Have you heard that as well? Or?
Well, yeah. I mean, the rods are they're about 1,000 times more sensitive than the cones in detecting light, because they are used at dark. Yeah. So that is why if you look at an object in the dark, you won't see it because your focus isn't there. There's no colour coming off it. There's no light coming off it, so you don't see it. If you look to the left or the right, in essence, bringing your periphery vision into the middle of it, you will see it clearly. So there is that, and the reason for it is basically at night time, the eye is very, very good at detecting fast movement and straight lines. That is why forces people are trained to go slow at night, to move very, very slow, so they don't get picked up. And all their clothes are all sort of creased and mangled, so there's no straight lines anywhere. So again, you just don't notice it.
That's interesting because one thing that I used to teach a ghost hunting workshop every year, and it was a very in-depth course. And one thing I used to talk about is something called drift illusion. I don't know if you've heard of this.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, do you know when you go into a haunted house or a house of any sort, really, and you're walking around? If there's let's say a fence post, which is interesting because you were talking about straight lines.
Yeah.
If there's a fence post or a poster or something with zigzaggy lines or anything, the periphery vision will see that as movement. That really ties in with what you've said, and we've never talked about that before. No. It's interesting that a poster obviously has straight lines on the side, or a fence post or a picture is straight lines, and it's normally those. That's why sometimes people are driving and often they've thought they've seen a figure stood at the side of the road, and it's actually a road sign. And,
very much.
And they've not realised it, and it's just your brain misinterprets it. So I think again, what comes through our course and our future courses is you do have to rule this stuff out, in that you've got to try and work out what it is. So even though you walk past a room with its door open, let's say what's that fantastic place now on outskirts of Doncaster, Cusworth Hall. It's got plenty of open doors, and one thing I've noticed there whenever we've done a ghost hunt at Cusworth Hall is when people are walking past, people have said, I think there's some movement in there. but every one of those door openings have got straight lines or
Exactly,
a poster
yeah.
or a window frames there, and they're straight lines. And if they're looking forward, it will feel like there's actually something in there.
Yeah.
But there's never anything in there. It's so I think for me the Shadow Men, which is not only being driven by the internet, it's also being driven by a misunderstanding of
Definitely misunderstanding
of natural phenomena caused by peripheral vision, and also I suppose a lack of understanding of what shadow men could be. But I certainly don't believe at all that there is one shadow man.
No. Well, it's silly to put, for want of not using any stronger word, but I just feel, it's misunderstanding, definitely.
The recent phenomena, if you go online and look for ghost stories, you find shadow men. And the other thing is black-eyed children. Now, these have been around now for the last 5-6 years. And basically, if you don't know what black-eyed children are, these are basically ghost children that appear at various haunted locations or woodlands or things like that. And these children look very pale. They've got and where their eyes are, they're either got black eyes or sunken eyes. And Ian's got one in his room now, for instance. So they've either got black eyes or missing eyes and that sort of thing. And when this first came out, when I first started hearing about it, which was about 2015, I'll tell you why, is because at that time I wrote a book called British Ghost Stories. And I wanted to address that. And on the front cover of my book is a black-eyed child. Unfortunately, the book got heavily slated by people who bought the book thinking I was going to talk about black-eyed children in a scary, positive way, and I actually destroyed the whole thing. But I never learned, do I, Ian?
I think people such as yourself who query it, who question it, I think that is needed, because whether you argue a case against it or the case for it, you need to understand both points of view, and if it's not what you want it to be, well, perhaps your thoughts in the first place were wrong.
Absolutely. I mean, my point of view, and how I am in regards to reports or experiences, I always try to go to the original perspective, original report. I try to find out exactly what started these reports, and certainly with black-eyed children, the thing is now is there's nowhere to hide on the internet, so you can very, very quickly find out where something started. Things like Slender Man, which again is an internet hoax that unfortunately led to the murder of a child in America, and I think it's also led to one recently. But Black-Eyed Children was a similar mania, but it seemed very sort of orientated in the British newspapers, with the Star, the Sun, all publishing stories. Not only did I find out that it started off as a internet forum hoax, by an American researcher who claimed that he was being haunted by by a girl who had black eyes, and she was called Mary and that sort of thing. But what kicked it off in Britain was a British researcher who has written a number of very bad paranormal books all around Staffordshire woodland.
Yeah.
And basically he got a medium involved, and the medium came out, and she said, to quote her, "These spirits need my help. Black-eyed child ghosts are reportedly the bringers of bad news, so my advice would not to be interact with them unless you know what you're doing. I think they are spirits with unfinished business. They have a story to tell, and I feel that once they have said what they want to, they will be willing to pass to the other side. These children are troubled souls, and they don't hang around for nothing." I mean, how much rubbish is in that statement?
Flipping loads. It sounds to me the old, everybody needs rescuing, and but that's a different topic. But yeah, I do feel it's it's something that is made up, and somebody buying into it without the prior knowledge, perhaps.
Yeah, I certainly feel with the medium, she's being brought into this case, or this case. I mean, this case, I think it took place at the Four Crosses Hotel or pub in Staffordshire. And it was struggling financially, and I think in the end it actually sold. They began to say that it was haunted by black-eyed child ghosts. And basically, a ghost hunting company started up in the area, needed a little bit of coverage, so they started promoting black-eyed children ghost hunt at the Four Crosses and Connect Chase. So it instantly started gaining traction. It came out in summer, so the media didn't have much to write about. And the next minute, you've got black-eyed children spotted in Scotland and Staffordshire and everything else. So we know, again, it's media hype. But yeah. I think there's a core issue here. I think any medium who got involved in this and backed up the story that they were black-eyed children ghosts are doing two things. Firstly, they're ignoring their own intuition.
Yeah.
And secondly, they're ignoring their spirit guides.
Yes, of course. I mean, how can you sort of think, oh, yes, there's somebody there when there clearly isn't? And unfortunately, on some of the venues I've been at, the medium is saying, oh, yes, there's so-and-so there, where it's just been made up. Oh, I've got somebody on that top of that bed. Can you see them? Oh, yes. And you're thinking, well, hang on, I just made that up, but you're buying into it. So you've got to bear in mind why. I would call mediums in, to stand up for, if you don't feel it, do well say, rather than sort of patching into it because it sounded good.
This is what we're trying to get through in the course: is be true to yourself, but also be true to spirit as well.
Yes, definitely.
What tends to happen is a medium will read about something and then suddenly they start buying into a particular narrative of a haunted location. And what I mean by this is, let's say I know a particular English castle that is run by a very strong character. They've always promoted that King James I was there, even though there's no historical evidence at all that he was ever there. And then you'll have mediums actually backing this up, saying, "Oh yeah, I've got King James here. He's stood here, and he's kind of looking around, and he's looking confused." And
he's probably thinking, "What the hell am I doing here?
Well, what's this? What's this dump?" We both know which castle it is, so we're laughing. Yeah. Sorry, guys. Yeah, I think it's not being true to what their guides are saying. And let's face it. How many cases do we have where children have no eyes are haunting locations? Yeah. It comes back to this sort of idea that a couple of things are happening. Is firstly, people are buying into a hoax and not trusting their intuition, not trusting their spirit guides, and going with the story for financial gain or future glory. And then the other issue is I certainly feel that by portraying all of this as being real, it brings down the whole study and subject as it is. Who's going to believe in black-eyed ghosts? There's no records of children with no eyes wandering around. I must have 300, 400 books dating back from sort of 1880 all the way through to 1980s on ghosts of particular regions and areas.
Yeah.
And I went through a lot of those books. I went through something like 90% of those books. And there was no records whatsoever of any black-eyed children until 2014.
Yeah, I think it's been like I say, it's a manufactured phenomenon to sell tickets at a venue to raise funds to keep that venue going.
Yeah, I mean, certainly with the black-eyed children in Britain, one of the reasons why that took off was that particular gentleman was writing these books, claiming that there was a wild beast, a yeti, I think a pig man.
Pigman.
A pigman. He was claiming that people had seen sightings of a pigman. And all of this goes back to a magazine called Man, Myth and Magic. And a very, very good writer called Frank Smythe decided to write a ghost story. He made it up and he put it in the magazine and in the local newspaper. And he wanted to see, kind of how it would react. And he claimed that there was a phantom vicar, and it was around Hackney, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And he put this in the local newspaper, put it in his magazine, and over the following month he got letters of people saying, "Oh yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that. I've seen the Phantom Reverend. He was wearing a dog collar. He had a dark hat, and he realised that it was utterly made up. It wasn't psychic. It wasn't anything like that. Yeah. But he made it up. It very random, and people." Claimed this rightly or wrongly or misunderstood what they'd seen. And it kind of backfired on him because he had to kind of put his hand up and say, "Sorry, I made it up." But he did it to see what was the reaction from the general public. And when people have unusual experiences, one thing they try to do is attribute it to somebody else's experience. And I think that's what happened. People might have genuinely had a very unusual experience in Hackney, and they automatically attributed it to being the ghost that they read in the newspaper. And I've seen this many, many times with a lot of cases over the years where people say, oh, I think I've seen Jack the Ripper, or I've seen this, because they want some sort of authenticity to their sighting. And it can feel very, very remote being a witness of something that nobody else has seen. And the one thing that you want to do is confirm to yourself that you've seen it as well.
Exactly, yeah, it is. I think there's a lot of people, certainly been on previous events that we've both been on, whereby they are wanting to check that they're not, would you call it, hallucinating, they're not making it up, and at times when they are verified as saying, oh, everybody else is seeing what they're also seeing, then they end up in tears because they've been proven right, or they end up going away because they've always tried to disprove it, and when it's proven true, they can't handle it at that time. So people need that sort of vindication, don't they?
Yeah. I mean, it comes back to the famous Gallows of Justice one, where the guy went into the cave system there, the chapel.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, come on, it's all a load of rubbish." And the wooden cross hit him on the face.
Yeah.
And somebody called Annette, who we both know,
yes.
She recorded this. Now, the interesting thing is that gentleman, he was a non-believer. He couldn't work it out because he knew the cross was in front of him.
Yeah.
He talked to me very quietly about it, and he didn't want really to promote it so much. I think it was about a month later, he was there again, and he'd come all the way down from Aberdeen. And I said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "I need to know if it's going to happen again." I said, "Well, it probably won't." He said, "Why? If it's happened once, it should happen again." And he sat in the chapel all night.
Yeah.
And nothing happened.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "I don't understand it. What happened the first time? Why was it hallucination? Was it a fake? Was it this? Was it that?" I said, "Look," I think you really are reading too much into this. And you had a paranormal experience, which is a rare experience.
Yes.
You was chosen for that, because I'd certainly feel that it was a spirit that did this. Obviously, it wasn't. I don't feel it was a poltergeist as such. It was a spirit that did this, and I think it was trying to get a reaction from him. And I said, I feel here that you've had an incredible experience. You've seen the video footage, and Annette was kind enough to give him the footage. Do you know what's the issue?
Well, that's it. Yeah.
But he couldn't grasp onto it. So
no,
yeah.
I mean, I was at a venue in Lincoln, which is no longer available to the paranormal, and there was a bloke there with his son. Now the dad was very, very skeptical. Oh, this is all load of rubbish and that general thing. And then it wasn't until the early hours of the morning, we were all in a group seeing what we could feel and whatever, and suddenly he just shouts out, "Who the hell did that?" or words to that effect. Yeah. And he said, somebody's just hit me. And then he went straight to his son, give him a mouthful. And his son was saying, "Dad, I haven't done anything." "Yes, you have. You did this." And I said, "Look," I said, "your son didn't move. How can you see?" I said, "Because I've been used to doing it." And there's several other people were saying, because there was a little bit of light filtering through from lamps outside on the road and outside of the venue. So you can get, it wasn't totally pitch black. And everybody said his son didn't move. Well, he just, know. So yeah. He's had his skepticism challenged, couldn't cope with it, and just dragged his son out. His son must have been about 28. He just dragged him home, said, "Get home," And I thought, I felt sorry for him,
It's a good way to get your own back, though, isn't it? I know. I'll give my dad a whack on the head.
Yeah, I know, that's it. But the thing is that his son didn't move.
No. But I mean that's it. It's how people deal with particular experiences. I think the reason why we wanted to talk about shadow men and black-eyed children was certainly from a medium's perspective, and for people out there who are prospective mediums or training to be medium, is is kind of find your own way. Don't be
Yes.
driven by a story. Don't be driven by a history that you know. One thing myself, Andy, and I've learned over the last 20 years is whatever the history is, you just rip it up, because history is written by the victors, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, yeah.
And the amount of evidence that's come out over the years from Ian and other mediums that I've seen is just incredible. You know, it really does open the scope, and as a medium, you should go in with fresh eyes. Every time you walk in, go in with fresh eyes, because I think every night can be a different story, a different arrangement of people come to you, of spirit come to you, and you cannot go into a location and say, I'm going to have King James I, Henry VIII, and I have Mary Queen of Scots as well, just to finish it off, because it's not like that. And more often than not, those three people might have only visited that place once, and yet why shouldn't you be talking to the maid, or why shouldn't you be talking to the person who's cleaning the front steps? Because they were there far more in that place, and probably have got a more interesting story to tell as well. And that's what I think with spirit is. My beliefs might be slightly different than yours, Ian, but I certainly feel that when spirit come through at haunted locations, it's because they want to tell their story. They want to say.
No, I'm totally with you on that.
I think sometimes there's a lot of activity at venues because spirit's kind of saying, "Hey, do you know, I want to tell you what happened when I was here, do you know," and you do hear these stories, and I'm not talking about, by the way, sorry, Ian, I'm on a rant.
That's fine.
And I'm not talking about the stories are not always, oh, I was a mother, and my children were taken away from me, and all this. Sometimes the stories are very mundane and can be, I was the gardener here, and me and my wife, we had a lovely life here. We worked for the lady, and it can be so mundane, and you're thinking, you kind of deep down, you're kind of thinking, is that your story? But to be honest, I think if anything, that shows a different part of history, that people are same as us, living, breathing, and dying. A lot of the stories that I bring through, sometimes are quite mundane. I don't know about yours,
Well, no, they are. They're very down. I had that woman who kept on talking about the vicarage in the garden and come to visit her dad, and her dad used to look after the vicarage garden. Stuff like so. But you can get certain paranormal companies, I'll say no more than that, who only bring through the famous ones. I've got King James, King Henry, Queen Elizabeth, whatever. When like you were saying, what about their staff that have been there for years? You know what I mean? You're more likely to get them, and that is where. And certainly people want to say, well, no, actually, what the books are saying about the fire starting in the library, it didn't. It started in so and so because I died in it, and then through the repetitive nature of, say, maybe 6 or 7 mediums going over there, all saying the same story, causes the to have some research into it, and found out, well, actually, the fire didn't start in the library. It was where the mediums are saying. So it does build up on that very, very much.
One last question for you, Ian. Who do you think is the most famous ghost that you've ever seen?
Well, I have only seen 2, I can note of 2 famous ghosts, and one of them was, I can't remember his name, the bloke
that famous
Prince Rupert,
Prince Rupert, yes,
because I think you were prompting me, what's he dressed like, and I thought, well, he's about this high, he's all in purple, and I didn't know the history behind Prince Rupert, his so-called devil dog or whatever, but it turns there, and I've also, and it was after the fact. I didn't recognise him until after the fact, but I thought myself, I'm bigger than him, and it turns out to be Charles the First, but it was a fleeting glimmer of him, but I can remember giggling because I'm only 5 foot, and I thought, I'm bigger than him, and I found out that Prince Charles was only 4'10".
Yeah. Wow. I didn't know that, but
no, that was Bowling Hall Way, I think.
Yeah. That was a strange place, very strange place. And I think the most famous ghost I've picked up on is Well, the two come to mind. Is one I did a venue that we only did once, and it was in Huntingdon. I'm not saying it was Oliver Cromwell, but it was certainly part of his. Is it retinue?
Yes, yes.
It was it was definitely his inner circle, and I felt I was seeing people from the early Civil War, and there was Fairfax there, and there was a few other people. And it's a shame, actually, we only did the venue once, but it was a cracking venue, and I didn't really know a great deal about it. And it was only afterwards I found out that Huntingdon was really heavily into the Civil War, and there was
very much. It isn't far from Cambridge, though, is it? Where Cromwell lived for a period, didn't he?
Yeah, Ely, and all that sort of place, isn't it? Yeah. But there was that one, and then secondly, when I was at 35 Stonegate in York, again I was aware that there was some linkage with Guy Fawkes, and it wasn't Guy Fawkes, but certainly it was kind of, they were talking about him, and they were talking about where roughly he lived. Now, I'm pretty sure, based on what Spirit was telling me, that he lived a few doors up. Nobody knows for sure exactly where he was born and where he lived in York, because obviously some of the streets have slightly changed, but it's certainly different from what the history books. But they were telling me what he was like and what he was there, and what he was like when he was there, and it kind of gave me the impression that he was kind of a bit of a bully when he was a young guy and stuff like that. But again, it was very, very weird. It was kind of, I didn't expect to bring through Guy Fawkes. Certainly wouldn't have even aimed myself at trying to bring it through. So.
The thing is, I'm sure the same is with you, Martin. If we come across a famous person, I question it. Why am I seeing him or her? I'm thinking, is it the archetype of what I'm thinking about getting here, or what I would expect? But that again, sort of comes over what we teach about going into it. Even if it's the second, third, or 10th time there, is you enter with a fresh mind. But certainly, whenever I do feel I've got somebody famous, then I'm questioning it.
I think that's the right thing to do. Absolutely, you've got to question it, because if you walk into a location and you straight away you're bumping into Mary Queen of Scots, then you've got to question who is this I'm picking up on, and is this somebody who was at the time of Mary Queen of Scots one? And I think this is where you need to bring in your guides a little bit more as well. And I think you've got to put a bit more work into it. It's one of those things where you've got to kind of put your mind into gear and maybe not talk until you've got more information, because it would be very easy to say, I've got Mary Queen of Scots here, and it's interesting. Again, I've had mediums who brought through Mary Queen of Scots, and one thing that you talk to any historian about Mary Queen of Scots is that she was incredibly stupid. and everybody always talks, when they bring through Mary Queen of Scots, she's always seen as always seen as somebody who was manipulated, and all. She was incredibly stupid. She just made really bad decisions, and she did, and none of this comes through when mediums pick up on her. It's always what's they know from the media. And
she's very strong, very tall, very aesthetic, very commanding,
Yeah, they always make out that she was more beautiful than Elizabeth and stuff like that. And again, this is driven by archetypal information rather than question. I'm seeing Mary Queen of Scots. So is this an energy that was at the time of Mary Queen of Scots? Is this a strong female? Is this a female that's same as that? How can I break this down? Can you come forward a bit more?
Yeah, exactly.
Can I look at your hair? Can you show me more? Can you, and can you talk to me more? And rather than jumping the gun and saying, I've got Mary Queen of Scots here. She's got blonde hair, which obviously she didn't. She had red hair. And that's when mediums fall down. So. But
the other thing there, and perhaps we can talk about it on our next course, the ghost hunting medium one, whereby where regularly you have spirit of the location, and I find myself, I said, folks, have we got anybody local to this area? Because I've got somebody who was. And they go, yeah, it's maybe about 4 or 5 people say, yeah, we're all local. And then the spirit person says, oh, I used to live on blah, 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 blah. There used to be some houses, but now they've been knocked down. And they're saying, yeah, it got replaced in so-and-so. And then they're talking about the area, and the locals are saying, you've been here before. I said, I haven't. I live about 180 miles away. Why would I come down here for a walk around? And you're mentioning streets, but things that have changed that you wouldn't know of unless you've done, 17 hours Google searching constantly, But I get that has given the evidence of spirit, the intelligence, the interaction with working with the people on that venue, because often than not they're thinking, oh wow, yeah, he's talking about going. He used to drink at this pub. He was 3/4 of a mile away from this venue. He used to walk here to get there, and it's all verified. They think, oh yeah, I've done this, I've done that. So I like that type of thing, that gives the ordinary person's point of view of a locale.
Totally agree with you. Totally agree. One of my favourite readings I gave was, messages, was again at the castle we talked about earlier, but it was a very quiet night, and I turned to a guy and I said, I've got your father here and also his next door neighbour. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, your father's telling me that they lived in sight of Tutbury Castle. Mm-hmm. And he said, yeah, how do you know that? And I said, your dad's telling me. And he said, right. And I said, and next to him is Alfred Nicholson. He said, how do you know Alfred? How do you know Al? I said, because he's here. Yeah. And it turned out that they had farms next to each other in the 1970s, and Alfred Nicholson was laughing and saying, he was such a bad farmer, and he nearly killed himself once, and the lad next to me, and he was saying, how do you know this? He said, we used to say my dad was terrible. In fact, he gave it up and ended up. He said because he parked up the tractor, got out, started fixing the muck spreader, and he'd not basically put it on a handbrake or anything, and it all rolled back on him, and luckily he was able to lay flat, and it went over top of him. So there was all sorts of stories like that. But again, it was local. It was nothing to do with the castle. But his father and Alfred Nicholson turned up that night and were chatting. And he said, are you sure you've not found out about Alfred Nicholson or found out about me? I said, I don't even know who you are. We're in the pitch black.
Yeah.
I don't know who you are. I can't see you. I said, I'm just telling you, and I gave him his dad's name. I told him what farm. I told him everything. And again, it was nothing really to do with the castle, but it was the locality, and they decided to pop in for the night. So yeah.
I just think it's so rewarding from both the medium and the person having that message. I think it's very, very warming. Really is.
Absolutely. And what a great way to end this podcast on a positive of how good mediumship can be. We've started it with how mediumship can get caught up in stuff, and let's finish it on a high that mediumship can deliver some incredible information, and it just needs the medium to be a pure conduit of information rather than adding interpretation.
Yes.
So yeah, me and Ian, we are back on track on writing the next course, which is, and drum roll, it's called, it is provisionally called How to Be a Professional Ghost Hunting Medium. And it's for mediums out there who would like to work more as a professional ghost hunting medium. And it is packed with information already. It's bigger than the course that we've just released, and it tells you everything you need to be a ghost hunting medium, everything from the basics through to the advanced, through to even business information as well. So if you need information on how to promote yourself, how to get out there, how to get working, it's got everything in it. And I think it'll be out in this next couple of months. So it'll be definitely coming soon. and it's very exciting times, isn't it, Ian?
It is, yes. I'm totally buzzing, honestly. I just feel it's very much the way to go. You know, working in the media, over the internet, social media, the newspapers, books, and all that type of thing. Then I really do feel that is the way forward, because we have the option. You know, Martin and I have the option, as we are doing on our current course. 8 different countries so far, and we're in the comfort of our own front rooms, you know. So it just gives us that extra outlet to help people who really otherwise we just wouldn't be able to.
Absolutely. And so thank you everybody for listening. We'll be back with a podcast. I think what we'll do, Ian, is go for another question and answers podcast, because we've not done one for a while.
Yeah, I think that would be good. So, you know, if you've listened to this, ladies and gentlemen, obviously if you are listening to us, then please send us in questions.
Yeah, absolutely. You can do that through the Facebook page. You can do that through our website, and all the details are in our bio. So you can go to our website, use our contact page, send in your questions, and in the next podcast, we could be answering your question. Do you know, anything you want to talk about, whether it's about your own development, whether it's about mediumship in general, or any particular thing. In the past, we've talked about reincarnation, dreams. I think we've talked about everything near enough.
Well, yeah, we have.
But we love it. We love talking about it. So
it is. Yeah, it is. Sorry, Martin. We just can't do it without you. You know, it would be nice for your interaction, folks and folkesses.
Absolutely. So, you know, get your questions in. We will answer them. We'll probably do a live podcast and answer your questions. So you have a good week, Ian. And you,
Martin.
And everybody else, thank you for listening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.